So I'm not heartless. Let's be clear. I am not heartless.
That's about a creature has feelings.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You are in the studio with Memoria Press.
Thank you.
It's not a venison bone, but hopefully it makes you feel something.
Yeah, it's not a venison bone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with our core four, Paul, Tanya, and Martin. Glad to have everybody back.
Yes, I've been in Orlando at the FPEA Homeschool Convention where I've talked to some amazing homeschoolers, and we have many fans out there in Florida. Everybody wanted to know where you were and why you weren't speaking.
Oh, why wouldn't they?
Did you speak, Tanya?
I did not.
Okay.
No.
But Martin, you have at least the GHC coming up, right?
Yeah, I was looking at my calendar. I've got Ontario. I've got some other thing in Texas, the ACCS conference. And then I was just looking, I got something in August. I've got two things in October, which is, my falls are starting to.
Oh, you're going to HLS Orlando in September.
And yeah, that's
to speak at
October. I think that's one of the October
at their
days.
gala. Yeah. I heard about that.
Yeah.
I spent some time with those ladies. That was fun.
And
yeah,
that is the good thing about traveling.
We
get to see people all over.
Yes, I love talking to people. Yeah. And in a week, I'm going to THSC in Houston, so I hope many people come to see me. Mm-hmm. And then I'll be in Ontario with Martin because I love to travel with Martin.
Somehow I got off the homeschool conference bandwagon.
Listen, but I tried.
I got you invited me to go to a conference after I'd already planned a wonderful weekend away.
Which this shows where your priorities are.
Sanity is where your
I'm also
priorities
going
are.
to SCL, and Sarah's already making comments that I'm traveling more than normal, but it's because she got used to me not traveling for 2 years while I taught.
Right. Yeah, when you teach, you really get, that's just
it's kind of anchoring.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Right. Well, today we're going to get updates not only on travel schedules, but on what everybody's reading. And then we are diving into our mailbag. You listeners have emailed us questions, and we are going to answer as many as we can. I wish I had a big prop, but maybe you can hear the papers in the background. I wanted an actual bag with letters, but didn't get to it.
Well, it would have to be a computer because they're all emails.
Typing.
Do we need to start giving physical address out so that they could actually mail us
letters? Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be great.
We
could also grade on penmanship.
Letters.
I've never had
great on penmanship.
Yeah. Right.
Oh. Well, what's everybody reading? Summer's in full swing at this point.
This is a hard thing because we do the show every week, so we're expected to come every week with a new book. Well, I don't read that fast, so I'm still reading Edith Hamilton's Mythology, and I'm still reading Passing the Torch by Lou Marcos, and really enjoying the Marcos book. I've said it before; it's maybe the best book on classical education I've read.
I ordered one for you and me, but it hasn't come yet.
Yeah.
Am I supposed to wait in suspense for that?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
because Martin's bragged on it for 2 months now.
Good. It's good.
Oh, of Lou Marcos's book.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were talking about some completely other title that you ordered for me.
No, but I did get 2 Sabatini books at Books Bloom.
Books in Bloom.
Yeah.
Books in Bloom.
Yeah.
Yes. But I can't remember the name of them, and I didn't bring them.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
I usually
appreciate that.
get all of her Sabatini. That's where I got most of my Sabatinis is from Jan Bloom.
Yeah.
Well, when I got them, I said, I don't remember what I said, and she said, "You're buying these because Martin loves Sabatini."
Probably.
No, you told me to get The Believers by Janice Holt-Giles. So I started that a couple nights ago. And I still have the other books I'm reading, but I was just in a mood of I need something new. I need something different. I think I'm going to love it.
I think you're going to love it too.
Well, I've read.
She's a great author.
She is. Janice Holt-Giles.
Mm-hmm. And she's a Kentucky author.
Yeah, she's a Kentucky
you'll
author.
recognize, it's just like where we live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I've read several of her books, and she's a really good historical fiction writer.
Mm-hmm. And then I have gotten most of the way through Horatio Midshipman Hornblower.
Yeah, that's a great book too.
Yeah, I think
which just shocked me. That's one of those books where you pick up a book and you think, "Am I going to? I mean, why would anybody read this?" But you read it because you have to, which I did, and then I loved it. I mean, I just fell in love with it. I don't like the sea.
Well, it's kind of a genre, and some people like certain genres and don't others. But, a lot of people have compared and contrasted C.S. Forrester, who wrote those books, with Patrick O'Brian.
That's right.
And I think, I don't know that we've talked about it in the show, but I tried Patrick O'Brian, and there's just something, he just dawdles in the way he writes, and he just takes a long time to get around to something. Whereas Forrester, it's really straight ahead prose, and it's aggressive prose. It always moves forward, which is really what you need in an adventure book.
Mm-hmm. And it's episodic too.
And it's episodic. So that one is. Some of the other books
they aren't?
Are full regular novels.
Okay, yeah, because the one I'm reading, Midshipman Hornblower, I could very well see how when Martin was reading to his kids, you could read something and it would be fully contained, and that would be a nice thing, right? For that
like Robin Hood or King Arthur, where every chapter really stands alone as an adventure.
Yeah, it's almost like a collection of short stories.
Yeah,
the same character.
That they have this one major theme running through.
Right. And I just came across the old VHSs when I was digging up something out of boxes after we moved that has the A&E series that they did on Horatio Hornblower, which were really excellent. Very, very good. Yeah.
Find your dust
your
off. I was just going to say, I'm going to dust off my VHS.
While we're on the topic of books made into movies, I recently found out there's a new series of The Count of Monte Cristo. And
I saw
excited.
that too.
Who's making it?
I don't know.
Like it's newly produced.
It's brand new.
Dana sent me a link. No, that like Masterpiece got the rights to, I guess, bring it to the U.S. or something. Ooh. But I don't think Masterpiece produced it.
I think it has to be better than the last one. I was so angry so I read the book and then I watched the movie, and they changed things that just did not need to be changed.
Yeah, but this is a TV series, so it gives them more time to develop stuff.
Well, we'll see.
So
I'll let you watch it first,
because the book is really a very Christian book,
and they stripped all of that out of the movie. Mm-hmm. And that does make a difference.
What do you mean?
I'm reading the very newest book by Frederick Backman. Have you read Frederick Backman? Well, he's a modern author, and I just really like his books. They're very quirky, full of quirky people. They really could be YA, except for the language, I suppose.
YA meaning young adult.
Right, because they are always about young people. But I really like his writing, and he is very quirky himself. Like he'll come out and say, "I don't do well on book tours. I'm antisocial. I do better in a room by myself." And then he has, he's forced to be out in the public eye, but really he's only comfortable writing by himself in a room. Huh. And so his characters kind of reflect that some, but it's a very fast read. Because it's, it's modern, so it's easy to read. But then I'm going to move on to Huckleberry Finn with Catherine. Yes. And we're going to read Huckleberry Finn and then James. Yeah. So that's next.
Nice. Well, moving right along. Over the past few weeks, we have collected your questions, everything from teaching methods to themes and specific novels. We've gotten a lot of questions. All across the board. And today we're going to answer as many as we can. In no particular order, I might add. So not a ranking with these, but the first one, let's see. While I get that ready, how are you guys feeling? You in the hot seat?
I think let's do it.
Depends on the question.
Right.
That's right. The nice thing is there's three of us. So if you don't want to answer, you just keep your mouth shut.
That's right. Nobody notices.
That's true. Okay. Well, this one is, I hope I don't pronounce her name wrong. I'm just going to pronounce it Natalie. She She is asking a question about mythology and our approach to it. And she says, what's the approach Memoria Press takes as a Christian curriculum concerning the Greek and Roman philosophy? I'm a Christian mom, considering giving my children a classical education, but I'm worried to expose them to all these philosophies, still trying to conserve our Christian beliefs. Are there any guidelines that I should follow when we're reading these great books? She has a couple really good questions. She says, let's see, does Memoria elevate the Bible over mythology or give it an equal position, or do you let the students judge for themselves? I'd like to know your personal positions because it's important to me as a parent to know, well, the source from which I'm feeding the minds and hearts of my children.
I think if you cast that question in terms of this, mythology or the Bible is just really the wrong way to look at it.
She's actually talking about the great books, not mythology. Okay, she's talking about Greek and Roman philosophy, and then she says, do we elevate the Bible over the great books? Okay. So go from there.
Well, yeah, I just, I think that, you kind of need first, I think, to look back historically at how the church has treated these things, okay? You go back a little ways and you find in America, the Puritans in America, Cotton Mather probably being the most famous and well-educated of all of them. And they had no problem with this. Cotton Mather went to Harvard like a couple other the founding fathers did, and they had a thoroughly classical curriculum, and they learned mythology, among other things. And he wrote one of the great defenses of classical education, Magnalia Christi. And so the Puritans didn't really have any problem with the early Puritans. And if you go back further in the church, these were things that were, in the education of the Middle Ages, which is what really formed Christian education. Reading the great works was part and parcel of that. And all of that comes after the sorting out that the church did in the early centuries of the church. By St. Basil and the two Gregories and Origen, the early church fathers, who looked at the writings of the pagans and they realized, number one, there was a lot of truth there, right? Which they found not having any divine revelation because they were human beings created in the image of God. And so there are things you can learn from the created order. And even the mythology is part of that. Mythology is basically speculations on the part of the ancients, which they cast into stories, and they're tall tales, right? And those things are not dangerous now because that whole belief system is dead. It's just a matter of study now and learning what it was they believed. But because they were stories that they wrote. Mm-hmm. Because the pagans were searching, right? They didn't have the answers. They were human beings searching for the truth and searching for, what the true was, what the good was, what the beautiful was, without having the guidance that Christians received from a divine revelation. And some of them got pretty close. Plato was talking monotheism by the time he's writing. And so this is the way Chesterton looked at it. I think is the best way to put it is simply paganism was a search and Christianity was the answer. We can't blame them for not having the answer because it wasn't given to them. It was given to the Christians. And so, the best pagans were searching earnestly and finding some truths. And then there were, other pagans who weren't, but you can't, I don't think you can make it a dichotomy. I think it becomes a false dichotomy because some things Plato said were perfectly in line with Christianity.
And we might also, because she asks, do we elevate the Bible over the great books or do we place them in equal position? And how do we, I wonder if it would be helpful to explain that we do have the Christian studies track. where they're memorizing scripture, they're learning the story.
We do elevate the Bible, and we do think that everything points to God, and students know that. All of our curriculum is written from a Christian perspective by Christian student or teachers. Our teachers are upfront teaching who have active Christian lives. So it is all taught from a Christian perspective, and it's very obvious. I hope that that Christianity for us is truth and supersedes any other truth, and that we're not threatened by the study of these other things because we know, and our students know, that God is.
Well, and also, you treat the Bible as Holy Writ, right? It's a revelation from God. You don't treat, in any classical program I know of, you don't treat the pagan writings in that same way. The pagan writings stand on the strength of the arguments that they present. Plato's Republic or something like that. That's different than the way you treat the Bible. The Bible is sacred scripture, and you do not treat these writings that way. They're like any other writings that are not specifically Christian you might read today.
I think that's helpful.
And I mean, she specifically mentions Greek and Roman philosophy. And I think it's important to sort of qualify that when we're having our students read the great books, in particular the ancient classics, right? When they're reading the Oresteia or the Aeneid or the Odyssey or whatever, we are guiding them through that. For one, it is not a just, you all evaluate. No, what is actually being said here? And then let's together evaluate that. Mm-hmm. But second of all, it's also putting together, or like in the child's mind, a perspective of the world. And the ancients were nothing if they weren't realist, right? They looked at the world around them and said, what then can we know about reality? And that is the fundamental perspective of Christianity as well. We are not trying to create realities out of thin air. This is like our reality is that God, reality is that God became man, right? And suffered and died and rose for us. So like everything that we're holding is true because it's in reality. It's not just something that we want to believe. It is something that happened. Mm-hmm. And it's something that's happening today. And that is the same fundamental orientation of the pagans, right? Is that our question is, what is reality? And so that, as we go into modern times, that all of that gets broken down. And so that's actually a shared perspective on reality that we hold. And that's like a fundamental understanding about the world. And so while we are going to hold their hands and guide them towards what values are we pulling out of this, that underlying foundation is something that they are going to imbibe, and that is a good thing for their faith.
Mm-hmm. And this is something like even in the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther wrote 2 letters to the nation for Germany, basically championing classical education. Philip Melanchthon was probably the best mind of the Reformation, and he was one of the great defenders of classical education. So if you look at all the great Christian minds all along the way, they all pretty much held the same position on this.
Let's move on to our second question. This we got from the Memoria Press forum, which if you go on our website, there's a forum tab and you can look at questions, see people's answers. You can ask them questions of your own. And Callie wrote to us, and she was describing a conversation she had with someone where someone thought that Memoria Press was sort of gatekeeping, was the word she used, in terms of we were the ones who thought we could define classical education. And
you're going to love this one.
It was a really interesting question. I'm going to try to summarize it and read some of what Callie wrote. She said that
Who are they to define it?
Yes. Who's Memoria Press to define classical education? She says, this person has no problem with the Memoria Press curriculum, but they feel like our company comes across as very snobbish, and that to study the Western cultures only leaves out world history, and that's wrong. And so, what would you say to someone who says, do you think you're the only one that can define classical education?
No, I don't think I should define classical education. I think history should define classical education. And that's the thing we do. We don't say, hey, we've come up with this great definition and we think this is right and you have to believe it. We say, go back and look at what classical education was, what classical educators said it was, when classical education was being done in schools. That's all. You just point to the historical reality. I mean, that's all we're doing. We haven't come up with anything new. We're just saying, look, when you go back to before the turn of the 20th century, when all education was classical, what did they do? What did they believe? What did they believe they were doing? And it's pretty clear. They're trying to pass on the culture of the Christian West. That's what it was specifically for. Nobody doubted this. If you would ask anybody at the time, that's what they would have said. And they're doing it through learning Latin and through learning Greek, which was the only way up until the late 19th century you could study classical works because they were all written in those languages. And so that's what they did. So that's not our definition. That's history's definition.
And taking that a step further might be asking the question, not only do we maybe not think we're gatekeeping the definition, but we're not the only ones who are producing what we would say is classical.
Well, we've even been criticized of not being classical enough.
Right. That's true.
And so, no, I mean, we are a part of a movement, right? And we are offering, the best that we can based on what the work we have done to try to fully to imbibe this tradition when being cut off, for decades and century from that tradition, right? I mean, there is a rupture. We're trying to recover that, and so we are one instantiation of, or like we're trying to bring this to life, but there's a bunch of people trying to do the same thing, and obviously we'll make mistakes just like everybody else will.
I think part of the confusion is she does say at some point that, and I don't know where it is, that, or maybe it was somebody else on here, that my little short reel I did of the definition of, what it is, can you have a classical education without Latin? That I, when I give that definition of classical education, I say Cheryl Lowe. Because I took it from her writing. But I wasn't trying to say that she defined it. I was trying to say that her point is, this is the definition. And she then says, and maybe I should have put that in there, that this has been the same definition for 2,500 years, and who are we to change it? That it's not her definition, but maybe that is some confusion, is that we are trying to define it with our founder, when she was just saying this is what it is, has always been. And so we can't change it. We have to, this is what we need to teach. But part of the other question, Martin, is that we're leaving out world history, and that's wrong to study the Western cultures only.
Western culture studies world history. I mean, this is the thing. These people will say, well, shouldn't we appreciate other cultures? Yeah, we should. And in fact, you're going right along with Western civilization there, because the West has always been curious. They've always been outward looking. They sent out explorations to other parts of the earth, and they sent along anthropologists and linguists to study those because we were interested in them. The reason we say things like this is because this is what Westerners say. And we've always been that way. We've always been inclusivist in our things. So you go and you read a lot of the lists of great books. They'll include works from China. They'll include works from India. We've done things like, this is the British in India. They saved Sanskrit. We wouldn't know Sanskrit anymore if it wasn't for British scholars that went in there and saved the language because they thought it was important, right? A Western civilization came in and saved it. That's the kind of thing we do.
But hang on. I think the critique is that in a K-12 program,
In a what?
In a K-12 program, we do not spend a significant amount of time learning anything outside. I mean, I had this experience just with my seniors, right? Because I was teaching apologetics and the fundamentals of the faith book. There's sections on like comparative religions, and I was here's what sets Hinduism apart from Christianity. Here's what sets Buddhism apart from Christianity. Here's what sets Islam apart from Christianity. And I mean, I know what their curriculum is, but I was still floored that I was like on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you know about Buddhism? And they're all like 1s and 2s, right? How much do you know about Hinduism? 1s and 2s, right? They're like, we don't study outside the West. And I was like, oh, I need to adapt what I was going to teach now, so I have more time to actually make sure you understand what it is before we talk about the differences between the two, right? But that was my mistake as a teacher. I should have come into that knowing that, but that was also their perspective. Like they felt like, having gone through the program, that there's this whole other part of the world that I don't know anything about. And I mean, my response to that would be, yeah, you have to know your own culture before you're able to go outward looking. Yes, as adults, we should absolutely be wondering about all of this stuff.
Absolutely. And if you're doing classical education in China, it's going to be a little bit different. You are going to study some of the things about your own civilization.
You have to. You need to.
Right. And so it's just right. You got to understand where you are, and what you learn is conditioned on where you are in the cultural milieu where you're in. So.
Yeah. So if you were to take our program that is designed really for Western people living in a Western society, and plop that down in China or Africa and not change it, you're going to be having massive problems and doing a major disservice to those
and not
people.
Changing the fundamentals of it, but just taking into account where you are.
Well, we're going to take a little bit of a practical pivot. This question is from Megan, and it's about teaching her children as they are at various ages. She says, I'll have 2 4th graders, they're twins, and a starting kindergartner this fall. We've used Memoria Press since the beginning, and the 4th graders have, but adding another grade seems daunting. Other curriculum boasts family-style learning, but I feel the classical approach is what's best for our family. How can I teach them all effectively and efficiently while still using Memoria Press?
The first thing I would do is send her to the forum, because those women have figured it out, how to teach multiple grades and how to get it done in a much better way than we. I mean, they just say things like some of them do a staggered start, like start with one child, get through the first week.
No,
in the beginning of your school year. Oh. And then once you're rolling with that student, then add the next student. Kindergarten and 4th, that sounds very doable to me, because kindergarten doesn't take that long each day, but you really can't combine a 4th grader and a kindergartner. And I did I was just actually this past weekend at a convention, and I had several conversations about, people wanting to combine, and I know it would be so much easier, but it is hard to combine, because what happens is the older students need to move on, and then they're still being dragged down by what the younger students need. And everybody's got to have every student deserves to have their 4th grade year and their kindergarten year and their 1st grade year and their 2nd grade year, and so you can't really take that away. And you can combine some things. You could combine Christian studies. You could combine, sometimes you can combine classical. Sometimes you can say, in this case, I mean, the kindergartner just really needs to do kindergarten. But sometimes you can say, the younger student, instead of starting a formal Latin program, would just go along with the older Latina students and just learn the vocabulary and maybe learn to recite the grammar forms and then study it formally the next year. So there are some creative things, but I feel like the experts on this are on our forum. Mm-hmm. And so I would definitely put this question on the forum and let them help, because they are wise women and men, and they have figured it out.
Mm-hmm. And they have, to Tanya's point, they have practical suggestions like staggering the start of your year. I've also met homeschoolers that stagger the start of their day.
Right.
And so they'll have practical stuff, but they'll also have curricular things. So if here, this is either what I have to drop or this is what I merge. But also, I think it also depends on that younger child, that kindergartner. If they've been showing signs that they are itching to try to catch up with their older siblings, then
that would be a big catch up from K to 4th.
It would be, but I'm just thinking like in the context of like reading aloud to your kids. You know, you could be reading aloud something that may be more appropriate for 3rd or 4th grade if that kindergartner is wanting to be like their older siblings. Mm-hmm. And you can capitalize on those things, but that's all situational based on the individual children you're talking about.
Yes, because technically for the kindergartner, you could skip all of the enrichment except for the art and music, because the art and music, it would be good for all the students. But you could just use whatever 4th grade literature is. The thing is, though, that kindergartner misses those great picture books. So it's just...
Well, and it may not be cutting out the kindergarten. It may be, though, that in order to engage your kindergartner, they're sitting down and listening to all the 4th grade stuff, too.
And I do love the idea of staggering your day. I have seen where people have said that one student gets up really early, and so they just go ahead and get started with that student. And a great deal of that work is done when the others roll out of bed. Mm-hmm. And so, that gives them a hit. I mean, you really just have to be creative and figure it out. I only had 2, so I feel like I can't even really speak to this. Because, I mean, some people are doing 7, 8 children, but then you've got the older ones helping the younger ones. So maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and particularly with literature, with books. I mean, I go over to my grandkids' house and I will bring 4 or 5 books from, the story of Ping to right now we're reading Arabian Nights with my oldest. Well, I just start on the easiest one, and then maybe when I get to the Arabian Nights, I might lose one or 2.
Right.
But still, there's several young ones there listening to that story even. So I think that's a pretty easy thing to do. My wife always did just reading time, and she'd just be reading something, Little House on the Prairie or Chronicles of Narnia or whatever it was. And the little ones, they don't get all of it, but it doesn't matter. If they get some of a really great thing. That's a great thing. Right?
And then when they revisit it, it is familiar.
Yes. Right, because those are books you want to read several times anyway. And if they've already had, heard it younger, then they can.
Whereas the things like phonics and penmanship and math are all cumulative. They have to be in their grade.
And those are also things that involve a little bit more individual seat work anyway. So, have them doing all their seat work at the same time, because then they can all be operating on a different level.
That's a good point. Okay, moving on. This next question is from Emily. Emily says, I am 16 years old and we have been doing Memoria Press for about 7 years. I've been watching and listening to classical, etc. for several years and really enjoy your discussions. Well, Emily, it's encouraging to know that you are out there. We love that. Now here's her question. She says, I'm rather prejudiced against books published after 1950 as the standard of literature has plummeted since the end of World War II.
Emily, I would like to shake your hand.
Through the screen.
Paul Schaefer is in complete agreement.
She says, it seems many modern authors care more about the quantity of their books than the quality of their stories. Numerous books in both young adult and adult publications reflect the secular and progressive worldviews of contemporary society. How does one ascertain whether or not modern books are worth reading as they've not yet stood the test of time? And if they are worth it, how is one to go about filtering through all the twaddle out there to find those few books that aim to preserve Western civilization?
That is an excellent question.
It is. So how do I know? And then how do I find the ones that are worth knowing?
That is difficult because you hear all these things about books and you really, like this is a really great book and it may be somebody that you really respect, but don't necessarily have the same. I mean, I have friends that we don't read the same books at all because I don't like what they read and I do feel like it's twaddle most of the time. I'm not going to name them. But I also have friends that that I have learned to trust their reading. And if they tell me that it's a good book, then I'm going to, more than likely, it will be worth my time.
She's talking about me here.
I'm talking about Martin, who has recommended, I mean, come on.
I think I got to a point where I stopped listening to Martin's recommendations.
You have listened to several?
Yes, I have. But there are others. Here's the thing about Martin. Can we just have a Martin moment here? Here's the thing about Martin. He will tell me, this is a really great book. You need to read it. So I will order it because I trust him. And then he'll come back a week later and say, don't read that book. I finished it. What you told me to read it before it's not worth your time. Well, I've already spent $20 on it. But I mean, it's happened so many times. Here's a book we need to carry in our curriculum. Oh, never mind. I finished it and it's really not, then we can't carry that. It's not very good. He's exaggerating. Over and it was happening frequently, but now I think he knows better. But you just have to find people that you trust and listen to them. Mm-hmm. But and sometimes you're going to pick up a book and it's going to be twaddle. Mm-hmm. And then, don't feel like you have to finish it. Right?
That's what I was going to say. Feel free to throw it out the window.
That's right. Mm-hmm. I have thrown many books that I mostly recommended by Martin.
Well, the other thing is she said 1950.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I put it later than that. Actually, there's some really good things written in the rest of the 50s and in the early 60s, and there's been a few things after. But that's really the best filter.
But what is going to be classic? We don't know. We don't know.
Right. Well, but we do know what has been considered classic.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but have you read all those yet? I mean, there's a lot of great classic books.
So spend your time on those books rather than looking for modern.
Absolutely, because modern books, it's not. What was the objection to modern? Did you say in the modern books?
She said that they spend time on their stories.
Over quality.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and some of it, okay, and there's a certain dragon book, the name of which I will not say. And my wife is reading it because one of our grandchildren likes it. And she said, it's just, it's cynical, it's smart alecky, it's these modern attitudes, which develop in the 60s, basically. And, I was there.
We know.
And, you just don't have that in these classic books. There's a seriousness about reality. There's an appreciation for the world, things in the world, and so I think that's the biggest thing. But if you stick with the old lists,
But there are, I would say there are some modern authors that are worth reading.
Yes,
well,
but
I mean Graham Greene. You love Graham Greene.
Well, those are very much adult.
They are, but still, he's a modern author.
But I would say to your point about reading the classics is in reading that you actually develop standards.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then
you can recognize twaddle real quick.
That's right. and you go and you read somebody like Graham Greene or Wendell Berry and you're like, okay, this fits the standard, or maybe it comes close to the standard. It's not going to be a great book, but it's something that's still worth my time because I'm looking for something enjoyable to read. Mm-hmm. And so I think in all of our conversation, we've kind of said two things. One is trust your friends, like find out which friends you trust so you can lean on recommendations. And the second thing is start with the great books, because you're going to have it's going to form your own ability to judge. Because there's so much junk out there.
Well, there is. And now, people are self-publishing. So there's even more.
Yeah, I would say anything that doesn't have enough margins on the side, that's probably an indication that it's self-published, and you might want to stay away. I don't know. Maybe it's a strong statement.
Some guidelines, Emily.
Yeah.
Well, good. Hopefully, that at least gives her a long list of things.
Yeah. And just the book I thought of when you asked this question, my wife was just reread it, is The Good Master by Kate Sarady. I can't remember the other book she wrote that was also.
Did she write The Winged Watchman? No, that was von Stockham.
That's Hilda von Stockham. Hilda von Stockham. And you learn to trust individual authors.
That is true.
And so if you find a book that's really good by some author, I mean, look it up and check it out. But if people say this is as good as this one, then do that one too. I mean, there's authors that were, so we sort of in our family had kind of an informal canon of great children's writers, and we would go and get more of their books.
I think this is a real problem for a 16-year-old because the young adult section of bookstores is just generally horrible.
It's terrible.
And so I would just stay away from there and just find people to trust.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff published late 1800s, early 1900s that might be more considered young adult now. It was never branded that, right? It is. It was written to a broad audience that isn't sometimes require the amount of intellectual focus that some of the other classics need, and so I would go look for those.
Right, because maybe she's looking for something lighter in addition to all of the great books that she's reading as part of her education. You do need a break, and you do need, sometimes biographies, but you can't always trust a modern biography either, which now we're calling memoirs.
I was going to say, I guess memoirs.
A memoir is written by the person who experienced it. A
That's
biography
right.
is written by somebody else.
That's right.
So it's a memoir and an autobiography, it's a biography and a memoir is the difference between a biography and an autobiography?
I guess so. I don't know. Do people always write their own memoirs?
Yeah.
Well, they get help.
I think so.
Because they can't.
Well,
they
can't
writers.
write.
Yeah.
No, but their ideas.
I think we should put together a list of modern authors that we think are.
Oh,
I think
no.
No, there we go.
No.
I can lay it down for you.
It would be
conflict afoot.
It means we have to sit and read modern authors.
No. Authors that we've read. I think there's more. There are more out there. I think Eudora Welty. I think
even Immortals.
Immortal. Yes.
Paul.
Oh, come on.
I can't.
What's wrong?
We've had the
He's
eyes.
nuts.
Yeah.
He is
I don't know.
nuts.
We've had this is because Emily and I are in 100% lockstep in sync here on this topic, and I feel like
A Gentleman in Moscow.
Love him
Well, no,
so
that's
much.
not for kids.
You love him too much.
You could read that as a 16. She's 16.
I would not.
Would you read the Lincoln Highway?
No.
Maybe. I can't remember this anything. No,
Okay,
there is some at the end of that. There's some themes that an adults can understand and what's going on.
I could possibly see A Gentleman in Moscow, but not the other two.
No, you're not thinking.
There may be a spot where I don't remember.
You're not thinking.
I got this vague recollection.
There's an indiscretion in there. I'm still not sure what to think about it, but that's not for children. Again, great adult literature. It's just great literature.
Can we say good, please? Please. That's the one thing I will add. This is my problem with him.
You stand alone here.
No,
y'all keep going way up here, shooting for the moon, and I'm like, just get in the stratosphere.
I think the guy is among the highest level of modern writers. I can't call any of them great.
It's just because you don't like him. You don't like his books. Did you read Rules of Civility?
Yes.
Loved it.
It's not Emerald's problem. It's Paul's problem.
You're alone at this table.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we take it to the last question where we could also have some debate.
Okay.
It is not about a modern author, but a question about a novel nonetheless. We have an email from Natalia. She says, "Hello, friends. My husband and I recently read Frankenstein, and it has been a source of really great conversation. Our discussion has centered mainly around one question. Is the monster to be pitied?"
Yes.
You know what? She had another question in there, but there you go.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Case closed.
I can hardly read it. I feel
Without
so
compassion?
sorry for the monster. Yes, I can. It's just very painful. I find it very painful, just like Lassie.
Frankenstein and Lassie. All right.
Just there are some books that I just will not revisit again, and Frankenstein is one of them because I find it so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, we know where I stand now.
Yep.
I wonder if I'm on her husband's side or her side. Natalia, if you come in July, I want to talk about this.
That's right.
No, I mean, it was one of the books I taught in a literature course a number of years ago, and it's been a while since I've read it, so I don't remember a lot of the details. But I would agree with Tanya that, this person has been created by Dr. Frankenstein, and with all the things that go into that, given his physical appearance and all these things, and he becomes this outcast. None of the problems he's faced with are due to his own doing. It's all what
Okay,
Dr. Frankenstein
that leads
did.
to the next.
It does.
How about this? Did he have free will agency, or did his creation in man's image doom him to be utterly depraved?
Well, and this is the thing. The men are created in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when men are able to create to the extent that God's create? They created in another man's image, and it's just this is one of the novels that treats of this can of worms you can open by doing things that you are not fit to do, and there's stuff that happens in the real world.
This takes us all the way back to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And yeah, so you create ethical problems for yourself that you do not have the ability to solve. We should never do any activity that puts us into a situation that creates an ethical dilemma that we can't solve. Whatever it is, don't do it.
I agree with that, but I can't recall. And I mean, there's part of this question is, this question, did he have free will or agency? And for some reason, I have this vague recollection that I always felt like he didn't. And so I didn't have to, I did not feel called to pity him because he felt more like a robot to me than an actual person.
I felt like he was in pain. I felt like he was in pain, and I took on his pain.
Yeah, I think I was looking at more of that. This is not a human, and
but it was somebody who could feel. It was something that could feel.
Yeah, I guess you do. I mean, she does.
This is why you make a good farmer, because you can slaughter animals without.
No empathy.
I mean, as a farmer, you have to do that. Well, you have to, you have to separate yourself. But I couldn't separate myself from Frankenstein.
But to be a good farmer, you also have to feel like, I remember after the first calf was stillborn and I watched that mother cow, I felt so bad for her. Like, you could tell that she was lost. You could tell that she had lost something. And I just felt horrible burying this calf and I was in a slump for a while just because I'd seen this. So I'm not heartless. Let's be clear. I am not heartless.
That's about a creature who has feelings, but he doesn't have a human soul. And I feel like in reading my remembering this anyway, that the character of the monster in there, the whole problem is that he is human, but he wasn't created in God's image, or was he? was that somehow brought about by the science? That it is all these things. Dr. Frankenstein is doing something he has no metaphysical right to do, and this is what happens. You can't. There's problems in there you can't solve because of what Dr. Frankenstein did. There's no solution to it.
So when her last question then was his repentance in the end genuine or merely emotional manipulation? Is he capable of repentance or emotional manipulation?
Well, and some of those, okay. And some
I can't
of these,
remember.
There's some questions that an author will create that there is no right answer to. They mean you not to be able to
because they want you to
decide.
have this discussion.
Because they want you to have this discussion.
Yes.
Well, sure. So that's a brilliant book, right? But I'm not revisiting it. I pity the monster too much.
I'm actually now inclined to go back and reread Frankenstein.
I'd love to hear what you need to say about that
afterwards.
Well, just in terms of books, it's why I used. I think it was in a high school class. This is the kind of discussion you want to have with students. It brings up issues, and even if you can't answer them, it makes you think through this kind of problem. And if you can, and there's no answers to these some of these questions, but the mere act of trying to answer them sort of exercises your ethical muscles.
It does.
That you can use on other things.
This does sound like a fun discussion between the husband and the wife.
Yes.
Like this is just something that they've read something, they're arguing about, what they read, and they're exercising those muscles, those ethical muscles.
I think it's great they're reading it together, that they're picking a book to read together.
Well, and you practice trying to answer the questions that a novel like this presents, and then you're faced with, in real life, cloning for some of those issues.
Right.
And that it becomes very relevant. Because, again, it's the actions of men that are creating ethical dilemmas you can't solve. And you have people who do this, and the people who do it often aren't even thinking about it ethically at all. They're not even, it's like they're almost not moral creatures, even though they really are.
They're just excited about the possibility of what they can do.
They can do, right? Power, in a way.
Well, that was fun.
Note to end on.
That was fun.
This was fun.
It was.
I like having all the different questions.
I know. Thank you to everybody who submitted one.
That's right.
We didn't get to them all, but hopefully we're going to get to do this again soon. So keep writing us.
Will we be starting to answer on the individual episodes, like an individual question on episodes again?
I think we'll go back to that.
Yeah.
Until we get enough piled up to have another mailbag.
Yeah.
Okay.
But at least for this time, great round of our first mailbag episode. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. And thank you for joining us. We will be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.